session 2, and we're about to look at the homework for session 2, which was covered the first 3 days of week 2 in the handbook that we have. Okay, the first thing she asked you to do was to summarize chapter 19. I'm going to read my summary, and then if you have any other things to add to it, or, you can share those things. So what I had was this. Moses brought the people to Mount Sinai, and he went up and down the mountain several times as a go-between. He brought God's words to the Israelites and their responses back to the Lord. It was a frightening scene, with a trumpet blast that kept getting louder, and an earthquake, and thick smoke and fire, and the threat of death. Any other things that came to you as you read that chapter? It was not a warm, fuzzy time in their lives by any stretch of the imagination. Chapter 20, we will wait till next week, because that's when we're actually going to do that homework for that. And then you had the map where you circled their routes so far. And it just kind of helps to see the map. They were, ultimately they were going to be going to Canaan, and if you look, where they are now is directly the opposite from there. And if they had made a straight beeline from Goshen to Canaan, they probably would have been there by now. Why do you think God did that? Why send them way down here when they want them to get up there eventually?
They're used to serving other gods, a lot of them, and they need to focus on Him, who He is, and His holiness.
Wouldn't God want to present Himself to them, so that's why they came to Mount Sinai?
Well, He said to Moses, this is a sign that's going to be fulfilled. When you lead these people out, you're all going to come here and worship me on this mountain. So for Moses, it's actually fulfilling a promise. You ever notice that sometimes God gives signs in their future, they're after the event has happened? I mean, like, okay, the deliverance has happened, and the sign is occurring now. But as far as God is concerned, it's a done deal from the time I say it, And we have all these promises, and they still haven't been fulfilled yet about the second return of Christ and living forever and so on and so on. But as far as God's concerned, done deal. But you're absolutely right, Cindy. I think these people have to learn how to be free. It's like kids, they have to learn how to become responsible adults. So they're in this in-between place. And the wilderness. And I don't think I ever really, you hear people, we say the wilderness is sort of like our being in exile. We're also in an in-between place. We're not in our final home. They were not in their final home. But there's a reason why they weren't in their final home.
Yeah.
They needed to learn a lot of things about the one true God. Because they've been surrounded for centuries by multiple false gods. And they're going to be headed to a place with more multiple false gods. So God knows exactly what He's doing. He's fulfilling His word, and He's training His people. And He's about to give them some of the most important information they're ever going to receive. To know who He is, what He's like, and how to serve Him. Okay, well that wasn't even asked over there, but just thought of it. Okay, so now on the next page, and we've already talked about number 4, that God made this promise that after you lead the people out, you're going to worship here. So let's go to number 5. God's going to give them a covenant with rules and regulations and things that He wants them to do. What was to be their motivation for committing to that covenant? What made them want to even do that?
They've seen what had happened to the Egyptians. We've seen His power, His, His might, and His anger.
Yeah, okay. They've seen Him, how He punished sin in the Egyptians. They have seen how He has provided water. Not just a little stream, but a gushing river of water coming out. They've seen how He's provided food. So they've learned that He's trustworthy. What He says, and that He cares about them. Okay,
So, but the reward is they will be the kingdom.
Right, and so that's, down in the third dot there, that some of the privileges, they're going to be a kingdom. They're going to be God's own possession. And not just his possession, his treasured possession. You and I all have stuff that's just stuff. And then we have stuff that we wouldn't part with for the world, you know? And we're his treasured possession, a kingdom of priests, I think you said, and a holy nation. Yes, they're gonna reflect this God to the nations around them. That's at least he wants them to. Okay, and then we skipped over, what are the requirements of the covenant? This is sort of like an if-then thing. If, what?
You obey God's voice.
Then,
Fully.
yeah, fully. Little detail there. And really, if you haven't obeyed fully, you haven't obeyed, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, we do try to get as close to the edge, you know, but anyway, if you obey fully, then all these things, you know, I will bless you, he says. Okay. So, and then I liked what she said in number 6. I like the way she worded the question. What's the difference between being a treasured possession and a possessor of treasures?
They're owned by God.
They're owned by God.
Treasured possession, wouldn't that be like some idol?
Not necessarily. They are at this moment possessors of treasure. Remember when they left Egypt, the Egyptians gave them gold, silver, clothing. Now, what the Israelites didn't know is that they were giving them things to help them build a tabernacle later on. But they have riches in their possession. For the first time in their lives, they are a possessor of treasure. But God says, it's even, I'm going to make you my treasured possession. In other words, my relationship with you is what you should value the most. And not all this stuff that's in your hand. You know? And then he said, now number 7, okay, so I gave you a nice ready answer for that one. Number 7, I kind of struggled with a little bit, even understanding the question. Why does God promise Israel will be a kingdom of priests versus a family of priests or a community of priests? Anybody have anything down there except a question mark?
I put kingdom denotes a king and those who serve him. A family or community involves doing what is good for the group.
Okay, so a king, you have somebody, you're under this king's authority, but yet you're going to be priests. So you're going to be serving me as priests, but you're going to be under some authority. Okay, and Peter calls it a royal priesthood. You think about it, back in Egypt, what were they? Slaves. They were nobody, just slaves. Now you're royalty. You know, you belong to the king. So, all right, and then he said, why does God promise that they are going to be a holy nation versus a great nation? And what's the difference there?
I wrote holy nation showing honor and respect and worship to their God, and a great nation does not necessarily indicate glory to God.
Right, exactly. Right. A nation may be great because it accomplishes a lot of things. A nation may be great because it's very powerful, like the Roman Empire, you know, trample down the whole rest of the world. A nation may be great simply because it has billions of people, like China and India. You know, there's a lot of reasons, different kinds of greatness, if you will, out there. But God says, what I want for you is that you be holy, that you reflect me. These people are pagans, they don't know the one true God, but you do. And I want you to reflect me to them so they can come to know them. All right, and then number 9, she asked you to look up 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, and you see that those phrases are picked up again. And actually, as I've been going through it, I've noticed a bunch of parallels to Peter, and so we're going to be talking about that more a little bit, so I'm going to just go on past that question for now. But how do the Israelites respond when Moses tells them the words that God gives them to speak? What do they say?
We will do everything.
We will do it all. And we smile because we know they didn't, until we think about our own lives. And we have said, we will do, and then until we don't. Okay, so she raises an interesting application question. When we enter into a solemn agreement, like a marriage vows or something, why do we say I do or I will rather than I'm gonna try my hardest or I'll give it my best shot? Why don't we say that?
Cause we can't make that commitment, we know we can't. I mean, like, well, I used to say, I can't learn the Ten Commandments, and for 60 years, you know, I've never done it, but then I said, I'll do it, and I
Good for
did.
you, buddy. Good for you. But why do we say, why does the bridegroom say I will, or I do, or whatever, or not, I'll try? It's a commitment
Of 100%.
of 100%. It's your intention.
Yeah.
And if, the moment you say, I'll try my hardest, or I'll give it my best, you're already mentally giving yourself an out.
Yeah.
So no. So then she says, well, is it right to say you're going to do something when you know fully good and well you're not gonna be able to keep it 100%?
I say yes.
Okay, why you say
I say yes
yes?
because it's by God's grace we're gonna do that
Right.
thing that we're vowing to keep for God, for others. And He'll give us the strength to do it.
And when we fail, and we know we will,
Yes.
we confess our sin, and then we get back up, and we go again in God's grace, because He will help us. And what we're striving for is to make the time between our failing to keep our vows, or, you know, not to do what God says, longer and longer. And the time, from the time that we do fail to repenting of it, shorter and shorter, so that over time, we're spending more and more time on the right path. But every time, God has made provision for our failure. If we sin, you know, if we confess our sin, He is faithful and just to forgive us. So yes, we can make those vows with a good conscience, saying this is the path I'm going to take. And if I fail, I'm going to get up again and get back on the right path. So, but just interesting to think about, you know, why do we say what we say? And, all right, so that brings us to day 2 on the next page. The people were to consecrate themselves, which is they were to set themselves apart as holy. So what instructions do they have? God told them to do 3 things to get ready for this huge meeting of God of the universe with the little newborn baby nation of Israel.
Wash their clothes.
Wash their clothes.
Purify.
Okay, let's just think about that. They've been 3 months in the desert, a dusty, hot desert. Water's kind of scarce. Probably when you get it, you drink it and cook with it. So they probably needed to wash their clothes about now. But anyway, so wash their clothing and then purify themselves. How? Sanctification. Okay, let's just say it. They weren't supposed, no sexual relations, you
Yeah, I was
know.
gonna say that.
Keep yourself separate. And it's not because there's something wrong with that, you know, for husbands and wives, but what it does, He wants them to be focused entirely on Him. Get yourself ready. Don't be distracted by anything. You know, focus on me. And where can they and where can't they even go during this time?
Up into the mountain.
They can't go to the mountain. I always kind of scratch my head when it says if they even touch the edge of it or something. Where on earth is the edge of the mountain? You know, the foot? Yeah, and I bet they did. I bet they had actually a barrier set up because, you know, you go hiking up a trail and where exactly does it begin, you know? So anyway, but he says, so I imagine they kept kind of a safe distance back. But anyway, don't come near. This is a holy place. Remember what God told Moses, take your sandals off. The place where you're standing is holy. Okay, so we're not gonna have this nation come charge you down here. Okay, so wash your clothes, focus entirely on me, and stay in your place. Don't try to come up the mountain. Now, why do you think God was so stringent about that? Why the big deal?
I think it's to remind them that he is holy. I mean, he's a loving God, he's a forgiving God, he's a powerful God, but I think we tend to forget, more importantly, he's holy and he's just.
Maybe
We
he's,
need that mindset when we come before him.
Of who he is. This is no little thing. You're looking at the one true God who created everything, and you don't just come to, hi God, buddy, you know? No, this is not something to be taken casually.
maybe he's preparing rules to obey before the 10 Commandments.
Well, I mean, he's done it from the beginning. You don't eat from this one specific tree in the garden. I mean, there's always been something that God has said, okay, I'm gonna tell you what the rules are for this place. Yeah, so then she has another application question. Okay, that was then for them. Does God no longer care about how we approach of him? How we approach him because of the blood of Christ?
Definitely.
I put Christ as our high priest, and we can approach God through prayer because of his death and resurrection.
And we can come boldly because of that. But I think we dare not come casually. And I don't mean, it's okay if we come in jeans, I think, that kind of casual, but it's not okay to be casual in our attitude. I really thought about that. I thought, how often have I come to church just because I come to church? And that's what you do on a Sunday morning. But not how often have I come and not really expected to hear God's voice. You know, when Pastor Mark is up there or whoever it is preaching, am I really expecting to hear God speak to me? You know, do I think about that? Have I prepared my heart and my mind that way? So I thought this was a good kind of a wake-up call, that we can be a little too familiar with God. And it's not that he can't be approached intimately because he's our Father. You know, and Jesus Christ did say, I call you my friends. I don't call you just servants anymore, I call you friends. But he's still God. And we can still expect God to have a message for us, for our heart, for our need this day. So anyway, it was just a good wake-up call for me, that maybe I can be a little too casual on Sunday in my expectations. All right, now we get to describe this thing. Okay, the third day is finally come. How many senses did you come up with that were affected by what was going on?
Sight, sound, speech.
Okay,
Smell.
smell that smoke, yeah. And probably dust. There's an earthquake. Well, I don't know of any earthquake when there's not rocks and stuff moving around. Touch, you would have felt that in your body, you know, the ground is shaking all around you. And then just the overwhelming sight. I mean, it's one thing to see a volcano on TV.
Yeah.
It's another one to be standing at the foot of it, you know, and seeing all this smoke and fire. Probably kids were crying. Lightning, yeah.
And the trumpet sound.
And the trumpet, and it said it kept getting louder.
Very
It's like,
loud, yeah.
how much more noise can I stand before my eardrums burst, you know? I mean, yeah, this, like I said, was not a warm, fuzzy time. This was a terrifying time. And how did they respond? Number 17.
Very afraid.
They were very afraid. It says they trembled. Now that's the understatement of the year. You know, yeah, they were afraid. Now, so number 18 again. Why on earth do you think God did that to them? Why didn't he take a softer approach?
He wanted to instill maybe the fear that he's all power.
Yeah. Remember who you're dealing with. I am God, the one God, and I am real, and I am not to be trifled with, so, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that, the last question was, and this may, some of you may not have ever experienced something like, has there ever been a time in your life where God's power was displayed in such a way that was frightening? It just filled you with awe.
The storm that we just had, that was quite high too. That was
You see the after effects, like we're driving down the freeways and we're,
Yeah.
that is a level, no
yeah.
trees there, to
Yeah.
back off, and it's more as we went to Grand Rapids, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's one thing to
Yeah.
hear about it, but to
Yeah.
see the destruction
Right.
of trees.
Yeah, that is true. When we see displays of His power through nature, yeah, that's frightening.
We watched as some of our neighbors' trees were coming over and there were sparks flying. I ran in the basement.
Yeah, yeah,
It was bad.
yeah.
I think the roar of a tornado, when we were in Indiana last time, we all huddled in the hallway and waited for the roaring to stop.
Yeah.
That was loud, and we knew something big was happening out there.
Years ago, about the second year I was teaching, I think after I graduated from college, one of my roommates was caught in a tornado in a fast food restaurant. And for months after that, if there was any sudden loud noise, she would just jump and, just like you said, now, yeah, she was traumatized by the noise. And, yeah.
Makes me think of Lloyd Mann.
Yes.
Yes.
They had both said that even though they were in the basement, they literally felt that suction when that
Yes.
roof went,
Yes.
And
And
it's
probably
like, that's
wondering
our
what's
key.
happening to the people upstairs.
Yeah.
If we're feeling it, what are they feeling? Yeah. So yeah, those kinds of things do put us in awe of God's power. So with that, we will go to the session, and you have notes again on a cream colored sheet. You can kind of follow along. Okay. All right, so now we're going to look at the scripture memory challenge. And so just have those two Jim Wilkins things with the parallels to 1 Peter face up, and then the 1 Peter text for marking on the right-hand side. But we're going to kind of start through this grade sheet. So we'll get back to the marking in just a minute. All right, choosing verses to memorize. I told you last week, you can read the book of 1 Peter if you wish. If you have other verses you want to do. And I thought, I didn't know what was going to be involved in Brenda Popovich's classes, but I know that several of you are doing that as well. And I thought, for those of you that are taking Brenda's class, you can use those memory verses for this class. We'll get dual credit for it, rather than trying to come up with other verses on your own. So that'll be fine. In fact, I was glad to see that. For the first two, are most of you memorizing it in the King James? That was the, no? Okay.
For her verses.
Yeah, for her verses, that's what I mean. Okay. Well, anyway, next week we're gonna look a little bit at an app and how to use it, so I may do it in King James, I may do it in two systems, but anyway. All right, so just to let you know that I think it'll be fine to use those verses for our verses here. Learning aids, we are going to look at an app starting next week and show you how to use it. And it's an online thing. I know that some people aren't comfortable with online, so I'll show you also how to adapt some of the little methods they use in the app so that you can do it on your own manually. And then together we are going to do the 10 Commandments. So there are 3 things that I want you to be able to do with the 10 Commandments. The first one is just to be able to say the simplified version of what each command is, as it's given in that chart on page 36. On the left-hand column, she's got just a simple statement. I mean, if you want to memorize the whole commandment, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But for our purposes in class, we want to be able to say what the basic idea of each command in order. We want to be able to do the correct motion for it, or fingers, And then I also want you to be able to say what characteristic or aspect of God does each command illustrate. I know what's been really helpful to me as I've read ahead and started some of the future homework and so on, is that Jen Logan points out, I always thought of the 10 Commandments as a list of do's and don'ts, you know, what you know how to live your life. But it's more than that. Each one tells you something that is true about God. Because remember, He's the one true God. And most of the nations don't know anything about Him or what He's like. So He's giving them these rules that are more than rules, they're reflections of His character. So I want you to be able to tell, what is this command reflecting about God? And I've given you on the gray sheet the first 3. So for next week, I want you to be able to, like I said, give all 10 of the commands, be able to do the 10 motions, and then the first 3 characteristics. And the first one for command, you shall have no other gods before me. Why not?
Because there's only one God.
There aren't any. There is only one true God. The nations need to know that. The Israelites need to know that. There's only one true God. Second command is, don't make any graven images. Don't make any carved images. Why not?
There's a limit to the idols.
Right. Anytime you see something carved, okay, it may be something little that can sit on a shelf. Is God little? God is infinite. He's not limited in any way. His power is infinite. His wisdom is infinite. His love is infinite. Everything about God, there's no end to it. He has no end. He has no beginning. He's just always been there. He's everywhere all at once. I mean, any carved statue that you make or any painting or whatever limits God in some way. I don't care how big you make the statue. Nebuchadnezzar made a statue that was, what, 90 feet tall or something? Well, that's peanuts,
Yes.
you know, compared to who God is. So don't make a carved image because, okay, you've got 2 things. Which one's real? You know? And then the third one, don't take the Lord's name in vain. She points out when you put up 3 fingers, that's the third command, it makes like a little W.
Yes.
Make sure that your words accurately reflect the character of God, because God's name represents the sum total of His character. And so when we speak of God, we don't only speak about Him or use His name in any way that misrepresents His character. So I want us to be thinking about those things as well as, that's one reason why God gave these 10 commands. I want the nations to know who I am and what I'm like. I want you to know who I am and what I'm like. Okay, so let's go through the hand motions. First one, there's only one God, okay? We're kind of pointing at Him. Okay? Don't make any carved images because, you know, yeah, there's 2 gods. There's
Too many gods.
Too many, you know?
Too many.
Yeah, and which one's the real one, you know? And then number 3, your words, don't take His name in vain. Or how did she say? Yeah, don't take the Lord's name in vain, or don't misuse His name. And then number 4, I kind of like to do it like this. Remember the Sabbath day? Okay, this is rockabye baby. You've got the little baby, or maybe a hammock, and you're resting. You're taking your Sabbath rest. So I kind of, you know, I mean, you hold up the 4 fingers, but then you just, you know, yeah, so rest, you know. And then honor your father and mother. She says, put up your hand like you're taking an oath. I promise to obey you. I promise to honor you. And then number 6, don't murder. Okay, to get 6, think of it as a gun. You know, bang, you're trying to, you know, pow, pow, pow. And then number 7, don't commit adultery. Okay, I think of this as a wedding cake with a little bride and groom standing on it for something. So don't commit adultery. All right, and then number 8, don't steal. And what she has you do is do it like this, only there are bars. If you steal something, you're going to be thrown in the pokey, you know? So don't steal and put yourself in jeopardy. Don't bear false witness. And she says, I think of it as this thumb leaning in. talking, gossiping, and telling false things about the other guys, you know. And then the last one, number 10, don't covet. Don't try to be grabbing what other people are getting, you know. So it's kind of neat. Some lady came up with this to teach her kids, and then Joan shared it with her. So that's kind of cool. So we're going to try to, and it's really helpful then, because it helps you remember in order. Because if I just ask you right off the bat, okay, what's the 8th commandment? Blah, 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 blah. You know, but don't steal.
The way I remember it is, kill is the worst, adultery isn't as bad, and stealing is not as bad as kill, so I.
Oh, really?
I
Well,
think they're all bad.
in my mind.
Okay.
One is just the same no matter what level.
Yes.
It's-
Remember,
it's a
just
memory
be
tool.
careful, because remember, James says if you break one,
You break them all.
you break them all. It's like a chain.
It's,
You know, you can't break it, and it doesn't matter which one.
well, once you weaken the chain, you're more apt to go to number 2.
Yeah. But anyway,
It's
You
just
know. yeah.
no other meaning, but just,
Yeah. But anyway, so I just thought we're gonna try to do that together, and I'll give you, the other characteristics of God as we go down through there. As they're covered. Okay, so that brings us finally to the little blue pencil. What's that all about? Well, you looked at some of the parallels to 1 Peter in the homework for today, but last week I had some listed there. And I thought, when I went to Brenda's class, she does kind of an interesting thing for the way that she marks scripture. And what she does is have you look for, one of the things she does is have you look for predictions and then find where they're fulfilled in the New Testament. And so in the Old Testament, you shade in the prediction and you put the New Testament reference as a cross-reference. And then you go to the New Testament and find where that's fulfilled and shade that in. And then you write the cross-reference to the Old Testament so that you can go back and see where it was predicted. And so you're gonna end up with a lot of yellow in your, in your Bible. Well, I wanna do something similar. These aren't predictions that come true, it's parallels. So, and you don't have to mark the Exodus ones, but we will mark this printout of Peter. Now, I thought, okay, so you need the references, and I didn't think to give them last week, so let me give them to you now. So over in the left-hand column of week 1, you can write Exodus, and then I'll give you the references, and you can write them down beside each little dot there. Okay, so just write Exodus somewhere at the top.
What page are you on?
Okay.
I don't think I'm on the right one. Is this it? 2.
Yeah, that's it. Right, so over in this left-hand margin, write Exodus, and I'll just go down now and give you the references. So the first one is Exodus 19, verses 1 and 2. Okay, and for the second dot, it's chapters 1 through 18, the whole first half of Exodus, chapters 1 through 18. The third one is the same, chapters 1 through 18. We're talking about the theme of that whole first half. And then the last one, the fourth one, is Exodus 19, verse 5. Okay, now go over to the right-hand column, and at the top, write 1 Peter, and I'll give you the 1 Peter references. Okay, the first one is 1 Peter 1:1, right off the bat. The second one is 1 Peter 1:3.
where am I supposed to be?
See.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then the third one is 1:9. And the last one is 1:2. And then maybe other places. In the future, if you look at the next, this week's one, I've given you the references, and I will do that from now on, so you have them, but you won't have to do this in class. Okay, so right now in class, we're gonna take these references that we just wrote down, and we're gonna find them in 1 Peter and color them in blue. So in 1:1, you're going to find that phrase that says, to those who are elect exiles of the dispersion, or who are strangers, scattered, or whatever.
Strangers in the world.
Strangers in the world.
Yeah.
But anyhow, find that phrase and just shade it with your blue pencil. because that is a parallel to a thought that was found in Exodus.
I don't know. Did I take one of yours? Yeah.
So, in Exodus in 19:1 and 2, it says, now the Israelites were camped in the wilderness and so on. It says it a couple of times about being in the wilderness. The parallel thought is that these are exiles of the dispersion. They were scattered in the wilderness. Well, what does dispersion mean? To be scattered, spread out. And one is a wilderness, the other is an exile. And I've given you the map of where they were exiled to, if you will. And it's modern day Turkey. But if you see Bithynia, it's up near the top northern border of the landmass there. And then Pontus is in paler print, but it's continues along the coastline. And to this day, the Pontic Mountains is the name of the ridge that's along that area. And then Cappadocia is underneath Pontus, and then Asia is over toward the middle, and then you go back up to Bithynia. So it's just kind of encircling that whole landmass. But the point is that then and now, we're in between. We're not at our final destination yet because of the parallel thoughts. Okay, and then in 1:3, we're going to highlight or shade in, born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's the second line down in that paragraph. Born again. Because in Exodus, we had this birth narrative that Jim refers to, how this nation was born. We have been born again. It's kind of a parallel thought. They were born again, or they were delivered to serve God. We are born again. Why? Well, that brings us to the third point, for obedience to Jesus Christ, as found in verse 3, sort of in the very middle of that verse. Obedience is already highlighted, and we'll talk about that more in coming weeks. So just shade on blue on either side of it. That's why we were born again, or that's one of the reasons why God has chosen us, is for obedience to Jesus Christ. And what did God tell the Israelites? If you obey me, then I will bless you. Okay. And then this last one is found in the second verse. Excuse me, that was the obedience. I jumped ahead of myself. 1:9 is the third one. Obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And that relates to deliverance. In the Old Testament, they were delivered. We have received salvation. We have been delivered from our sins. So just some parallel ideas. And if you want, I have even written in the margins, beside the blue underlining or the blue shading, the Old Testament reference from Exodus. You can do that if you want or not. But I just thought it's kind of neat to see there's going to be quite a bit of blue in 1 Peter as we proceed through Exodus. Okay, so and like I said, so for your homework, you can take this week's parallels and find it and shade it, but you don't have to do it in class right now. So we are done. So for next week, answer the questions for days 4 and 5 in this. You can also go back and answer question 2, which is to summarize chapter 20 of Exodus, and then work on memorizing the 10 Commandment motions and meanings and your own verses. All right, thank you.